Super Robot Wars OG Saga Endless Frontier. Wow, what a title. So this game that came out on Nintendo DS, it's actually part of the Super Robot Wars, how should I say, family series. So it's a huge series with tons of games that are way too many for me to know all of them. I have no idea, there's so many of them. But this is an interesting two releases that came out on the Nintendo DS. So the first one, it came in 2008. So this is an interesting game on the DS. By far the most interesting thing that makes it stand out is its battle system. So this game is really not like a classic RPG where you just select attacks. The difference here is that you have to time your attacks properly to maximize your damage output. And then you can also switch the characters mid-battle, so you do even more damage. But if you fail to attack properly, or you fail the pattern when you switch characters, the enemy can then block your attacks and even counter-attack. So the basic game mechanics ensure fluid gameplay and require also quick thinking at times. Of course, added onto that, there's many other skills which you can use to enable different ways of playing the game, and combined with the wide range of characters, it really does allow for a lot of different strategies. So the magic of the gameplay is that it's very simple at the same time. You can just pick up the game, you can enjoy it, you can go at it, but at the same time, you can also really think about it. You can come up with a lot of different strategies. So it also allows more hardcore gamers to enjoy as well. Now the cherry on top of all of that, the cherry on top of the cake, are the finishing moves. Those feature pretty awesome animation with very pretty backgrounds. They're very pleasing to watch, and they also feature sprites to the end. Besides the pretty sprites, they also feature 2D animation. This animation blends with the gameplay perfectly, and it really creates a product that is very pleasing to watch. Now, the story itself isn't anything really too amazing. It follows Haken and Ashen. They're exploring an abandoned, crashed spaceship. They happen to find the princess, and then basically Haken at first escorts her home because he's a bounty hunter, he does it for money, and then later they get more attached, the story progresses, and there's a whole story with a lot of stuff going on. But more than the story, the most interesting thing of the game are the characters, the interaction between them. They're very interesting, very funny at times. There's some drama involved. It can also be rather touching at moments. And it's the same with the enemies. The enemies are as interesting as the main characters. The characters on both sides are extremely diverse. As far as the enemies go, like, you can be fighting 16-year-old girls, you can be fighting huge minotaur bulls, you can be fighting giant battle robots. So there really is a lot of stuff to see in this game. Now, most of the battles in this game that you will be fighting, they occur through random encounters. This is maybe like the only downside of this game, because these can get repetitive at the times. You might find yourself fighting the same enemies over and over, or maybe it's going to be the same enemies with maybe like a little bit different color palette. But to be fair, like, these normal enemies also have very interesting designs. But for sure, the random encounters, just walking around the map and being stopped by the encounters, this can be the weakness of this game, and especially because because they're so random. It can be frustrating, and it can make the game drag at the moments. Now, one thing that is also pretty obvious just from looking at the artwork and such is that the game features a lot of fan service. Now, since this is a Christian YouTube channel, I am way too embarrassed to talk about it, but it's handled very well, to sum it up. So it is there to spice up the game, but it doesn't really overshadow the gameplay and the story too much. So it's well done. I really wouldn't say that it's just about the fan service or that it destroys the game. Now, maybe if you're like a Puritan, then you might not enjoy it, but in my opinion, it works very well. Now, the game also features limited voice acting, So these are mostly jokes, comments, and banter after battles occur, but these are left untranslated in Japanese. So unless you are a huge Japanese knowledge, unless you can speak Japanese fluently, most of this will go over your head and you won't really be able to understand it. But in my opinion, these do very good these do a good job of creating the atmosphere. It makes a very Japanese, very Japanesey feel to the game, and it does a good job to the atmosphere, so I like it very much. The DS has some special features, like it has 2 screens. Now the dual screens are utilized properly in this game, I would say. You have the stats on one screen and the gameplay on the other, and when you walk around the map and when you walk outside, you're going to have your character on one screen and the world map on the other. There really isn't anything out of the ordinary here. Touchscreen really isn't used too much, maybe like for some menus, but it doesn't do any gimmicky stuff, so it's completely fine. Now apparently the game does use the GBA slot, so if you have the GBA Super Robot Wars, you can insert it in the DS, and apparently it does allow you to unlock some of special items. So it is a nice bonus for loyal fans that had all the games. Now another thing that has to be mentioned is definitely the music. The soundtrack is very catchy, very nice. It goes up with gameplay very well, and it does a really good job. So the soundtrack is, I can't say anything negative about it really. Overall, I would consider this to be one of the more memorable DS games, especially for its unique battle system and the lively cast it has. So there really is a huge pool of characters. They're very diverse. Each of them is a little bit different. Every character plays a little bit different. They really are not. It's not like you have 2 characters and they play exactly the same. So like even though you have 2 androids in your team, Ashen and Cosmos, they play a lot different. They look a lot different. So every character that you have is somehow different. Be it just with the design, the way they play, or just the way they look. Their personalities are different. They interact between each other very well. So definitely I would recommend this game very much. Even though it's been 12 years since its initial release, it holds up very well. Like the 2D sprite graphics, these hold up very well, so it's not like 3D graphics. If you have a 3D game on the DS, it ages very horribly, but these type of games that have 2D sprites with the anime kind of look, these hold up very well, so I would recommend it. So with all that being said, this game actually got a sequel. It was released in Japan in year 2010, and with the first game being relatively financially successful, it had a mixed to positive, so mostly positive critical reviews. Because of that, we anxiously awaited the English release. We were very hyped about it at the time, but sadly we never got it. The game was only released in Japan. So only in Japan. But where the free market capitalism failed us, the gamers rised up. Rise up, gamers. So after 10 long years of emptiness, a group of valiant heroes rised up, with a honorable goal of sharing this great work of art with the West. And indeed, they succeeded and faithfully translated the game into English. So thanks to those valiant heroes, protectors of mankind, after 10 long years, I was finally able to play this game. So was the wait worth it? Definitely yes. So the sequel is called Super Robot Wars OG Saga Endless Frontier Exceed, and indeed it did exceeded all of our expectations. So just to start off, it features a beautiful animated intro, same like you would usually have in an anime. That is rather unusual for the Nintendo DS, and it makes it stand out a bit, to be honest. Now the story basically continues the events of the first game. At first it focuses on completely new original characters that were not in the previous game, but then the old cast gradually returns. So all the characters that we loved and cherished from the previous game now come back to make a return. Now the story also features slightly more dynamic storytelling compared to the first one. In this one, it will actually sort of allow you to play with different sets of characters. So it's going to switch between them and you're going to see the story from different angles. And then later they're all going to unite and continue the story in more classic linear fashion. So it's interesting that they experimented and did something a little bit different. Now, besides all the new characters, that there's quite a lot of them. Also, all of the old ones make a comeback. So one of the awesome things as well that is very worth mentioning is that the enemies from the previous game, now they can actually join you. They can join your team as your allies and they become support characters. So this is pretty cool, you know. It's very amazing to have the guys that you were fighting in the previous game now join you. That's a lot of fun. It's only unfortunate that they can't really be set in the front lines. That would be very amazing, but I suppose with an already such a big pool of characters, I really can't complain, so it is pretty cool for what it is. Now this game also features new side quests, so that's pretty cool. As you go along the way through the story, you collect wanted posters along the way, and as you collect them and you assemble them together, you unlock new battles with sometimes unique enemies and sometimes similar enemies that you would find in the game, but a little bit stronger, a little bit changed. This can be actually very difficult battles depending on your level, so these are a lot of fun. They provide extra content, and you know, it also maybe has a little bit of a replay value, so maybe after you finish the game you missed out a few, you can go back, you can find them. Speaking of replay value, there's actually quite a lot in this game compared to the first one. After you beat the game, you unlock New Game Plus. So the New Game Plus features a whole new extra part of the game that was previously inaccessible. So that is actually pretty cool. But also besides that, you also have some parts of the rest of the game are also changed a little bit. So as far as the replay values goes, this game provides very, very well, and it improves compared to the previous game. Also, some of the animations are improved. The gameplay, I think the gameplay feels to me slightly smoother. So even the old characters that were in the previous, from the previous game, they're giving some new skills, so they're changed a little bit. The whole game, to sum it up, it is pretty much the same as the first one, but is improved. I really can't think of anything that is worse compared to the original. Really not. So I would say, bottom line, this is like a perfect sequel. You really can't complain. Now, for a large chunk of the game, you do revisit a lot of the levels from the previous game. So maybe that could be considered a downside. But they're rearranged a little bit, or you visit them from a different side. So it's not like you're going for the same thing over and over. It is changed a little bit. Now, maybe one downside that I could complain is that the cast of new enemies is slightly narrow. So you will spend a lot of the time fighting the same, a lot of the time you will fight the bosses from the previous game, and after that they're usually going to join your team, and if not that, the new bosses that you're going to be fight, you're often going to have more battles with them. So maybe this is where I could say that it's a downside, but considering the huge pool of characters that is the new ones plus the old ones combined, again, I really can't complain too much. This game really sucked me in very strongly. Now that I grew a little bit old, over the years, my interest in gaming has decreased a little bit, but this game really sucked me in. Overall, I really love both of the games. I have a lot of nostalgia, especially for the first one, since I played it as a child. I really can't stress enough gratitude to the fan translators that voluntarily translated the game. It's very amazing how many of the games we got because of fan translators that would otherwise stay inaccessible to us. So that is very amazing. Overall, thank you very much for watching the video. See ya.